Hi, Michael. We are live
Hello.
now.
Hello,
Hi,
Christine.
yeah.
How are you?
Good, good, good. I see like a couple people now show up here, so there'll be more people showing up. So feel free to ask question when you guys want, and I think you can see in the comments. So I have the famous Michael Kitces here. So if you don't know him, he's like a celebrity in the financial advisory world. Everyone in the financial advisory knows him, but I think not everyone on my audience is in the financial advisory world. So why don't you introduce yourself? Like, who is Michael Kitces?
Oh, goodness me. I wear a couple of different hats these days. I published a blog out to the financial advisor community at kitsis.com. So a lot of the advisor community knows us from that world, but I'm the head of planning strategy for Buckingham Wealth Partners, which is a private wealth management firm that works with folks all over the country. I founded an organization called XY Planning Network, which does financial planning for people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s with a base of almost 1,300 advisors across the country.
Mhm.
And wear a couple of other hats for businesses back to the advisor world as well. So I live both the world of sitting across from clients, services for advisors in a B2B context, and writing and publishing and speaking in the advisor world as well. So I stay very busy between all of them.
Wow, yeah, I can imagine. So I'm really honored that you accepted my invitation to be my live guest, and this is your first LinkedIn Live. So I'm really honored. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm looking forward to this. I have spent a lot of time in the blogging and social media world and podcasting, but live streaming is a fairly new format for me as well. So I'm enjoying taking it all in and the live stream experience. Very cool to see the our audience sending in comments and giving us feedback as we go.
Yeah, so feel free. You got Michael Kids' live, so feel free to ask any questions to Michael. Okay, up to him if
Absolutely.
you want to answer that or not. Okay, so Michael, you have so much going on. So I'm just curious, like, how did you get started? Like, how did I know you had a career transition? Like, I mean, what was your career like? What did you major in, and how did you got to be in the financial advisory world and got so famous, and now you wear so many hats? Like, what was your journey like?
So the starting point for me, I suppose probably like so many folks out there, I went to college for stuff, and then I realized by the end of college I didn't want to do the things that I studied in college. I was a psychology major, theater minor, pre-med
Wow.
student. And the only thing I really figured out by the end of school was that I didn't actually want to practice psychology, theater, or medicine. So graduating from school and had to figure out what am I going to do now. And so I landed somewhat randomly in financial services at the start of my career. Just
Mhm.
I fell for kind of the pitch. Like, we want hard workers. You've got a great opportunity. You can build your own business. We want people who are good with math and numbers. I had a good background to that, and so it kind of landed that way. I actually wasn't very good at it early on, as I discovered many jobs in our industry. We say financial advisor, really, it's a salesperson job. I was
Yeah.
not a very good salesperson, so I barely managed to stick out in the industry and hang on by making a couple of changes in the first few years, just trying to find a way to stay on board because I liked the industry, even though I didn't like selling. And then
Mhm.
eventually kind of found my way, went back and got some professional designations in education in our space and started really crafting my expertise. And that was the lift that started moving me forward as a career.
Got it. So I'm just constantly reading the comments while you talk. So there's Trevor, like he's pretty he has this hashtag who do you know? So it's asking you, who do you attribute or what do you attribute to your success and who do you know? And he's into like, networking and stuff like that. It's all about who you know. So who do you attribute and what do you attribute your success to?
So I would really say it morphed over time. So the first stage of my career, I'd kind of call it like the first decade, was
Mhm.
really a what do you know thing. Like financial planning is a professional services business. Like, I can know a lot of people. At the end of the day, I don't actually know like what I'm doing, and I don't give good advice. Like, you don't last very long. At some point you cause actual harm to people,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
can damage their finances by giving them bad advice. And so for me, like, the first 10 years of my career was just immersed in learning education. I'm one of those people that has alphabet soup after my name of a couple of degrees and designations that I accumulated. That formed the knowledge base. And so I don't think I could be where I am not having taken that time for investing myself and building my knowledge. That being said, like while the first 10 years was very much a what do you know, build your expertise so you have the credibility, the
Mm-hmm.
past 10 years has been much more who do you know and the networking aspects of it. Part of that is building a platform of blogging and social media and literally kind of building a platform to get my voice out there. Having a platform is a great way actually to network and get to meet and know people. I get to access pretty much anybody in our industry up to the top by having the
Mm-hmm.
most widely listened to podcasts. So anybody and everybody wants to come on and be a guest. We get
Mm-hmm.
to talk to a lot of cool people we would not otherwise have access to with that. And I think there's a phenomenon that happens, at least for those who spend their entire career in one industry. I got very involved in our industry association groups from a very early start. Just 2 or 3 years in, I said, I got to start networking and meeting people and understanding who's who in our space. And so I got to meet some people and network them. I spent a lot of the time just with other younger advisors. I actually ended up forming a group for young advisors called Next Gen that still exists today with
Mm-hmm.
a couple thousand advisors. But the interesting phenomenon that happens, and kind of getting to Trevor's comment about who when you network and you're active in your professional organizations early in your career, when you get to a later point in your career, all the people you knew when you were young and they were young are now in very different positions in their organizations
Yep.
of leadership, and you get new opportunities to reconnect and create new business opportunities. So there are folks I'm working with today, and even people who have become business partners today that we're
Mm-hmm.
now creating successful businesses with, that 15 years ago were just two entry level people trying to survive in their first few years in the
Mm-hmm.
industry. And the career lift of both of us progressing means who do you know starts changing as you go down the career, or I should say you go up the career ladder, and the people that you built your career with go up their career ladder as well. So it has definitely been a shift from, I think, what do you know in your first 10 years to much more of who do you know over the past 10 years.
Mhm. Got it. So you said that okay, you didn't like psychology and theater, so you kind of went into the sales roles, but then but then you focus on like the first 10 years getting all the credentials, whatever. So
Yep.
when did you started like the trajectory become, how did you become so well known in the financial advisor? Like what was the catalyst for that?
I think ultimately the catalyst was moving, I would say broadly moving into the world of blogging and social media. Really, what it came
Hmm.
down to is just, you know, I'm someone that likes analyzing and sort of nerding out on stuff.
Oh, okay.
I learn things. I like to share what I learn. And, if that's your sort of style, well, then ultimately, the larger the platform that you can create, the more people that you can share with, and the more people that you can help, the more people you
Hmm.
end out reaching, the bigger your network ends out getting, the more business opportunities that come in. And so I think the inflection point for me was certainly the point I changed in 2008 to no longer be a full-time employee in an advisory firm, but say I'm going to have one foot in an advisory firm and one foot in the industry to try to
Hmm.
start sharing my expertise more broadly. And that evolved from blogging, social media, a newsletter service, speaking business. We've sort of iterated in a lot of different ways around content creation as content itself has evolved over time. For me, it's sort of twofold though, because I'm not just someone that likes to nerd out and share stuff. I'm also someone that looks and sees gaps and says, like, someone should do something about that. And since no one else seems to be doing something about that, I'm going to go do something about that. And so that's how we've also ended out with this growing series of businesses under the umbrella. I have
Hmm.
half a dozen different businesses that I've started and launched and built with business partners over the past 10 years. But it really all started with the transition of saying, just I'm going to start a blog. Like, I'm just going to make my little corner of the internet and share my expertise out to anybody who shows up and wants to listen. And of course, early on, like almost no one shows up. I think it was my mom and some close friends. But,
Yeah.
two or three readers turns into
Yeah.
five, and five turns into 10, and 10 turns into 20, and 20 turns into 40. And you allow enough time for that sharing and compounding to happen.
Yep.
And now, a couple of years later, it's hundreds of thousands of people who come read the blog every month.
Yep.
And we're now one of the largest media platforms in our little niche industry, just
Hmm.
from me writing my thoughts on the internet for 10 years.
Yep, yep. And then you write blogs like how often do you write? Because like you read you write very long. So I'm like wondering, you have all these businesses and you have the time to really geek out on those blogs, and then you're pretty consistent too in your blogging, it seems.
Yeah, so it's morphed quite a bit over the years. We've had a commitment for probably 5 or 6 years now of putting out content daily. One article a day. Like we write, as you
Wow.
said, long form content, so no one can read more than one article a day from us. Frankly, most people
Yep.
don't have the time to actually read even the articles you put out every day. They pick
Yeah.
and choose the ones that fit them the
Yeah.
most. So it's evolved for me a little bit over time that early on it was about kind of creating some time blocks and batching time to say, okay, this day is going to be a writing day and I'm just going to knock out 2 blog posts that day and get them
Mhm.
done over the next few days, because tomorrow I'm traveling for a speaking engagement and then
Mhm.
Thursday I've got something else for the business. Over the past probably 2 years or so, the businesses for me have grown to the point that I just truly don't have the time to do all of the writing now. And so
Yep.
we've been starting to grow a team of writers. We take guest posts out from folks externally. I still edit everything. So I'm kind of morphing from
Got
being
it.
the lead writer, the lead blogger, to being the editor in chief of a growing blog
Mhm.
platform. So part of that is kind of the evolution that comes with your business. If your business keeps growing with pretty much anything you're doing, as the leader, you have to keep morphing and changing your role in what you do in the business, or eventually you limit the growth of your own business by your inability to get out of the way of what the business needs to do next. And so for me, that was shifting from, I can't be the sole writer now. I have to be the lead editor and have more
Mhm.
people who are writing to support it. Make sure we have a consistent voice and expertise and focus, but not be the sole content creator. That being said, I still create the majority of the content on the platform. There's a lot of things bounce around in my head that I got to get out on a paper or type or podcast or all the different mediums that we do. So I still produce
Mhm.
a lot of the content, but we're growing a team now to be able to do that consistently and not have it be solely reliant on me and my schedule, because that's what we have to do to grow.
Got it. So I know you mentioned in that you didn't really contribute to the retirement accounts, but instead you're more focused on building income. So that's kind of different. Like a lot of financial advisors about like maxing out your retirement, your 401k, whatever. So I'm really curious about your philosophy. Like did you just not contribute to 401k and IRA, and you were just mainly focused on growing your income, your business? Like yeah, I'm curious to share to hear your philosophy on that.
Yeah, this has been an interesting
Hmm.
evolution, and certainly I think from relative to our industry in particular, kind of heresy to say like not contributing to retirement accounts, because our industry is very focused on everybody putting everything they possibly can into retirement accounts. So this kind of evolved for me a little bit. The In
Hmm.
the first decade of my career, I wasn't putting much of anything into retirement accounts because I was putting dollars into me.
Hmm.
I had the good fortune of a family that was able to send me to college, and I was able to graduate from college without any debt hanging over me. But the deal was like, we'll get you through college, and then like that's it. Then you're on your own. You're you. Go do your
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
So when I got into my career and realized like, okay, this undergrad degree alone probably isn't going to be all I needed to do, especially since I didn't do any of the things that I studied as an undergrad, because I didn't go into psychology, theater, or medicine. I
Yeah.
landed in the financial services world. When I realized I was going to have to get more education, like I couldn't I couldn't leave work and go back to school because I couldn't
Yep.
afford it. Because at that point,
Yep.
like I needed to pay my bills and uh,
Yeah.
uh, plus the cost of school, and I didn't want
Yeah.
to accumulate debt at that point. And so I said, look, I'm going to take whatever I would have invested into a retirement plan. I'm investing
Hmm.
it into me. And so
Hmm.
the dollars that would have been my retirement plan contributions for most of that time were dollars I spent on designations, master's degrees, all the additional education, all the stuff that I built up in that first 10 years, getting back to Trevor's earlier question of like starting out with the what do you know before I got to the who do you know. And so all those dollars essentially got tagged for, instead of putting into a retirement account so it grows, I'm putting it into me. Because particularly at that point in my 20s, and I think even in your 30s and 40s, if you're in your career for the long run, like, spending a couple $1,000s on a program, on a course to get $1,000 raise is
Hmm.
$1,000 on my salary that year, every year thereafter, plus future raises and growth. When I'm going to be doing this for 30 or 40 years, like, if I put a couple $1,000s in my education just to get $1,000 raise, that's worth like $40,000 or $50,000 in the long run. Like I can't even grow the money that much
Yeah.
tax free in a Roth IRA. Like that is a really big
Exactly.
really big return on investment
Yeah. Yep.
uh, in investing in myself. And frankly, some of the courses, programs, degrees, designations I took on, got me raises and promotions even more than just like $1,000 bump. Some of them were
Mhm.
actually very material
Mhm.
pickups, and so or more material pickups, I should
Yep.
say. Uh, and so investing into myself
Mhm.
ended out drastically accelerating income and career growth to the point that it was far more of a return than I possibly could have gotten by putting it even to something like a tax-free Roth account.
Yep.
And as I moved out of the first decade into the second decade, and we went from the what do you know to the who do you know, the dollars that I used to put into my education became dollars I put into creating businesses. So,
Got
the savings that I built up by
Mhm.
not putting money into retirement accounts and keeping it loose and fluid in a bank account, that was the money that let me go to my boss in 2008 and say, really enjoyed my job here, really enjoy working with all of you, but I'm going to do this insane thing where I go and launch a blog and start writing and speaking and take my income, this great salary I built up when you're in your firm. I'm going to take that back to almost nothing because I got some harebrained idea that I think writing my thoughts on the internet is going to build me a career in the future. And that leap never could have happened if all my dollars were tied up in a retirement account.
Yep. Yep.
Because you can't get those dollars out when you need them. It's expensive to get it out, right? We've got
Yep.
taxes and penalties and a lot of other stuff that's attached to it.
Mhm.
And so the dollars ended out being, first the dollars powered my education, which I had to do part-time while I was working because there was no other
Mhm.
pot of money out there.
Mhm.
Then it was the dollars that let me do the career change that ultimately fundamentally changed the whole trajectory of, frankly, my life. Then the dollars became the startup dollars to start businesses, to launch New Planner Recruiting, which is our recruiting business for advisors, to launch XY Planning Network, which now has
Mhm.
spent 3 straight years on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing list. We launched a tech
Mhm.
company called AdvicePay, serving advisors, and more businesses along the way. And all of those are
Mhm.
dollars that, at the end of the day, what would have been retirement account dollars,
Yep.
but I kept them liquid and available so that I can do things that build my human capital and
Mhm.
build my business capital. And at some point that will shift. I'll be a little closer to the retirement end date. I'm going to say, okay, I've planted a lot of seeds. It's time to begin to harvest and harvest them a bit. And we'll start making more contributions to retirement dollars. I am, a fan of accumulating at some point. But I
Right.
think we underestimate the value of investing ourselves early in the career and what you get from 20, 30, 40 years of career growth versus 20,
Mhm.
30, 40 years of investment growth.
Got it. So
And
so what?
even more so if you're inclined towards
Mhm.
entrepreneurship and creating businesses and you need some dollars to take a leap.
Got it. Got it. Well, that's a very interesting point of view. So thank you for sharing. So what do you think about rental properties? Like, I'm not sure if you're into that as well. You're more into building businesses. That's where your income comes in. So I'm curious to know, what your philosophy is around that.
You know, I mean, I'm certainly a fan of real estate for people that want to
Mhm.
spend the time and effort into direct real estate. You know,
Mhm.
I'm not a big fan of thinking about real estate investing as a passive income device, because at the end of the day, like, it's not passive when you gotta find your property and evaluate your properties and figure out what you're gonna buy and manage your
Exactly.
properties and be in the
Yeah.
landlord
Yes.
business. Maybe you can
Exactly.
get enough of a property opportunity that you can hire a property manager,
Yep.
but then that takes a slice out of the dollars, and
Yep.
then you still got to keep finding more opportunities. Like,
Exactly.
it's a lot of active work to do. And I don't mean to
Exactly.
say that as a negative thing,
Yep. Yep.
but that when I'm spending my time building career and I'm spending my time building businesses, I don't also have time to spend identifying and
Yep.
going out to invest directly into
Exactly.
real estate. So
Exactly.
not negative to it, but yeah, from my end,
Mhm.
the businesses was an alternative to real estate. I would not have possibly had the personal bandwidth to do both. And
Mhm.
frankly, to me, the opportunities in business after I was 10, 15, 20 years into my career in my industry and saying
Mhm.
like, okay, now I actually know what the opportunities are.
Mhm.
That to me was the bigger opportunity on the table. I don't think I would have done that early in my career, but the longer the longer you spend time in one industry in one space, the more you may start to see of, here's what people do well, here's what people don't do well. I
Yep.
I understand the problems. I know some people who could help create this solution. Right? Again, getting back to the
Mhm.
the who do you know? Like, no business I've created was just me. It didn't start with me. They're all with business partners. You have to grow teams to grow businesses. So that driving of who do you know becomes very, very important and impactful. But you need some time to do it, and you need some savings that you built up for it. And so that's where my energy and resources have gone.
Exactly. It boils down to like, what are you good at, and what do you, where do you want to decide to put your, time in? So some people are just really good with rental properties, then go for that. So it's all about, don't compare yourself to other people. It's like, what is working for you? So for you, you're really doing awesome with all your business, and that's what you're thriving on, right? So,
yeah, I
so
mean,
yeah.
if you've got a passion for real estate and some access to capital, this is probably going to go reasonably well. But if you don't have those things, then it's a little bit harder to get going in the real estate world. For me, the limitation was really just around time.
Got it. So,
I can only pursue so many different opportunities at once, even though I'm known for being a little bit frenetic and pursuing a lot of opportunities at the same time. There's still only so much you can do.
Exactly. So I'm curious, how's your daily life looks like? Like, if I were to, someone had to follow you for like Monday to Friday, how does it look like, your schedule?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, like it's certainly been turned a bit upside down in coronavirus pandemic world. And for me, the shift is kind of different than most others. A huge portion of my world historically has been speaking. Traveling for speaking engagements, being out at conferences in our industry. I was one of those road warriors who did 150 to 200,000 miles a year on an airplane, and have for the better part of a decade. So pandemic is strange for me because I haven't been home this long since approximately 2005, maybe 2004. Like literally 15 plus years since I've been home this long.
Yeah.
So it's strange for me just not going to airports. Now, I have young children, so it's actually really nice to get to be home and do bedtime routines with the kids every night. But the strange thing for me is, like, I'm grounded, and I haven't been grounded this way in, since I first spoke at a conference.
Yeah.
But because of just the amount of business activity and the work that I do, I've had to create a lot of structure, just how my life works, how my week works, to be able to get through and catch up with and keep up with everything. So I am a huge fan of time blocking. And for me, I actually don't just try to kind of batch time together. I actually set themes for my days, for full days. It kind of gets back to the old, at least I heard it as a Stephen Covey analogy. I don't actually know if Covey originated it. The big rocks philosophy that, you can imagine time as like this fixed jar in front of you. And there are things that we need to do every day. Some are kind of the little minutia that's out there all the time. That's like sand. There are a couple of bigger things that we got to get through. Those are like pebbles. And then there are maybe one or two like really big important things that have to get done every day. Those are the big rocks. And what happens for most people is the constant barrage of emails, questions, coworkers popping their head in, all that different stuff, all of which is sand. The sand fills up most of the jar. And then they're like, oh, well, there's those one or two, like, I got to do that big email. I got to send out that like contract thing or whatever it is. So they get a couple of pebbles in there. And then they go like, oh, yeah, there was this big rock I was supposed to work on today. Well, yeah, that's not happening because it's like 2:30 in the afternoon already, and I still got some things left to do. If you let the jar fill up with sand and pebbles, the big rocks never fit inside. And so the philosophy from Covey, kind of this big rocks approach is, no, the first thing you do is you put the big rock in first. Then you put the pebbles in second. And then you pour the sand in last. The cool thing about fine sand is it will fill every possible nook and cranny in that jar anyway. So it's not like you're not going to use all the time. But when you put the big rocks first, you put the pebbles second, you let the sand fill in last. When the jar fills up, and it always fills up, right? There's always more things to do than there is time in the day to do it. By definition, you are always hitting the most important things first. And so I ended up really taking this in as kind of a life of business philosophy around how I live my life and keep my time organized, particularly with so many different businesses and writing and speaking and obligations to a lot of different companies. And so I actually set basically big rock themes for all of my days for the week, essentially for all of my days for the year, because it was the only possible way that I could figure out how to not get overloaded with so many different things coming at me. Like when you do 50 speaking engagements, it's really hard to figure out, like, could you fit in the 51st? Well, like, I guess. I mean, who's counting after 50? But then, like, you get the 52nd, the 53rd, and like, this is good business. But
Yeah.
at some point, so many different things are coming at me. I was drowning myself
Hmm.
in, what were nice opportunities, but too many, and I was drowning myself.
Yep.
And so I set an entire Big Rocks calendar essentially for the year of the
Wow.
things that I'm going to be
Yeah.
that I'm going to be doing and working on. So like this many days I need for writing to write the articles that I'm planning to write for
Mhm.
our site. I need to hold this many days for speaking. If I'm going to travel and bring in the revenue I need to support our team, here's how
Mhm.
many speaking days I've got. I need days for our team just to
Yep.
make sure our team gets what they need from me. So I got to block off days for the team. I got to block off days for just working on the business, right? We get so
Mhm.
focused in the business. If you don't set
Yep.
some time to work on the business, you never get
Mhm.
around to spending any
Yep.
time
Yep.
working on the business. So we got time to work on the business days. I've got to set some separate days for podcasting because that's
Mhm.
sort of a scheduling exercise unto itself
Yep.
when you do a weekly podcast as we do. And so my whole life now is scheduled around Big Rock Days. So
Mhm.
Mondays are always team days for us. Just all of
Mhm.
my internal meetings are lined up on Mondays. I do
Mhm.
one meeting call after another. It's a long day. It's usually about 9 or 10 hours of meetings. But I know it's coming. I can mentally gear myself up for it. I know that I'm not going to have a ton of meetings for the rest of the week, so I can get through a big block of meetings on Mondays. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are flexible for me. So that could be used to be a speaking day. Now it's like a webinar day because we're doing a whole lot of webinars as our platforms pivoted in the
Yeah.
pandemic environment. That could be a writing day. If it's a writing day, all I'm doing is focusing on writing that day. I'm not dealing with anything else because we write big long form articles. So it pretty much takes me a day to really make a good article. So if that's my big rock for the day, that's all I'm focusing on for that day. Every now and then we'll just put a couple of buffer days, right? You need a catch up day every now and then just for all the other
Mhm.
stuff that spills over. And then so Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are kind of flexible around those different days, but we always set a big rock theme for every single day. And then Fridays are sort of twofold. I always do our weekend reading, which is a column we
Yep.
published for almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
We recap the most popular articles in the industry, write some paragraphs. And so for me, Fridays are both committed reading time because I clip the articles all week and I read on Friday to catch up. So I've always got a block of reading time, which is part of how I keep up on my
Mhm.
industry, the trends,
Yep.
the business opportunities, right? I've just built that into my
Mhm.
schedule. It also becomes a writing day because I got to write weekend reading. We send it out at 3 p.m. East Coast time. I'm usually don't hit the publish button until between 2:55 and 2:58. Like I am cramming it every time because I want
Yeah.
to keep reading stuff and I got to get it written up. And then we'll often do podcast recordings on Friday afternoons because I got a little block after weekend reading goes out
Yep.
until the day wraps up. And so it's been a strange shift for me because I spent a huge portion of my life and early career like fighting structure, fighting schedules. I like my open free time. I like to be creative. I like flexibility. I don't want to feel
Yeah. Yeah.
boxed in. I was hardcore into the like you cannot put me into one of these
Yeah.
boxes for a long, long time in my career.
Uh,
Uh, until I just piled up too much stuff and started drowning it and said, you know what? Like there,
yeah.
early on, my challenge was
Yeah.
that too much structure my schedule felt very limiting. Like I wanted the
Yep.
freedom.
Yeah.
And the shift that comes at some point, if you build a business enough, is that now I actually find the freedom comes in having the structure
Yep.
because
Mhm.
that's what lets me set limits and say I can take exactly this much and not more. And if I want a little more freedom, like
Mhm.
I just I put a rock for that on the
Yep.
calendar for a day, and now no one
Mhm.
else gets that day, and they're not going to do anything with it, and I know I can keep and hold that day.
Mhm.
And so it was a very strange shift for me, and it took me a couple of years of they both mentally adjusting and then just trying to figure out what structure worked for me to get from this world where no structure is freedom into a world of actually creating the structure around myself is the freeing thing that I know when I'm on. I know when I get to take a break. I know if I've got a hard day, I know I can schedule a less intense day afterwards.
Mhm.
And that's now part of how I keep the balance to be able to manage through what's still a pretty hectic life with a growing team and a lot of growing businesses.
Yep. And plus, you have kids too. I mean, wow, that's
And
amazing.
kids and an absolute saint of a wife who puts up with me.
Wow.
I spend most of my time just trying to not be the fourth child with the other three that we've got.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so actually someone has a question here. So Andres Yeah, Andres, he's gonna be he works for this virtual like trust and will company remote. So he's asking, how do you see financial advisors evolving to a virtual model?
So it's been interesting to see that the virtual model evolve. One of the founding principles that we had when we launched XY Planning Network back in 2014 was we actually had a requirement that all of our members be ready to work with their clients virtually. And it's still a
Mm-hmm.
requirement to this day. They don't have to be only virtual. So many of them also have local clientele.
Mm-hmm.
But we built the business requiring that everybody work with clients virtually. To me, just the level of video technology and communication tools that we have, like
Mm-hmm.
even today from where it was 5 or 6 years ago when XYPN launched, has come a lot further, right? We didn't have multi-platform live streaming the way that we do
Yep.
now. Even things like we had Zoom and GoToMeeting, but bandwidth was a little shakier. Certainly, if we go back 10 years, it would have been hard to do this because
Yeah.
I don't know if my clients have decent internet access to
Yeah.
actually be able to stream video. And the video to me is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to have meaningful conversations and certainly in our business and give advice
Yeah.
like just into the phone.
Yeah.
Like
I prefer video too.
you lose
Yeah.
all the nonverbal communication. Like, I don't really
Yeah.
know how you're taking this information in. The whole like, your wife's been really quiet. Can you tell me if she looks angry right now? Like, it just
Yeah.
doesn't work. I mean, I lived part of my career early on, like trying to do things like phone reviews with clients, and just it was horrible.
Yeah.
Video changes all that, right? I know we're on the same page because I'm
Mm-hmm.
screen sharing it to you.
Yep.
And I know how you're reacting because I can see it.
Exactly. Yep.
The video brings the face-to-face back in. And not that I think we're necessarily going to live in a world that's all in front of our computers. I think as a lot of us are living, like Zoom fatigue is real. We can only do this thing in front of video so long before it does get a little draining. So I don't necessarily see our advisor world being 100% purely virtual. I think in-person still filters in. Even as someone I spent a lot of my world. I also was a computer science nerd growing up. So like I'm in the gaming world as well. And
Mm-hmm.
these deep friendships you make playing games online, and then eventually you get to meet a person in person. It's like, oh, it's so cool. We have played World of Warcraft for 6 years together, and now we
Yep.
finally get to meet each other in person. So there is a
Yep.
power to the in-person connection as well.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think what we're collectively learning from from this pandemic environment is that a lot of people grossly underestimated how much you can really get done in a virtual model, and particularly when
Mm-hmm.
people just need expert answers to problems. Like, I got a problem, I need an answer.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that with the internet. I can do
Yep.
that online, and if it involves a human being, fine. We're going to turn on the video camera and do that.
Yep.
So, I've always seen advice kind of segmenting in two worlds. There's more of the point in time, like I need advice to solve this problem. I need an expert to help me with this thing. And that
Mm-hmm.
I think is going to thrive in the virtual model.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yep.
also I want an ongoing advisor to work with, an ongoing relationship, and help me along on this journey with all the stuff that I'm dealing with in my financial life that keeps changing every 6 and 12 and 18 months because life comes at
Mm-hmm.
you pretty fast. And that model, while I think there will be advisors that build that in the virtual world, and I know a few who are, I think a lot of that is going to stay in the in-person live world, the analog world. We need a good word for the not virtual world, the world. It'll stay in the world
Yeah.
for a while, because there is just something I think fundamental to human beings being able to
Mm-hmm.
gather together with other human beings.
Got it. So earlier, I know you were mentioning about, so I'm curious about what is your opinion, like, what is your opinion of people who's going for MBA? Because I have a lot of clients who have six-figure student loans, and then sometimes like, and when they're working right now, they're not even making much. And I know, like, I interview a previous lawyer, so she's kind of like trying to encourage people who are trying to go to law school to work first before going to law school, because then it's a six-figure debt, and then plus like most
Yeah.
lawyer who started out, she said they only making 40-50K. So like, what is your opinion of that? And then I have a Dr. Brad Klons. I don't know if you know him. He's a famous
Yep.
financial psychologist. So he was saying you always have to look at the going back to school as a business decision. So, and sometimes like it makes me wonder, it's like, is those school really worth it sometimes? Because being an entrepreneur, you don't even need any degree, right? It's like you're just really
Yeah.
smart. But then, so I'm just curious to know what your take in on that. Like, it's
So, so
Mhm.
so I will say, so like as a foundational point, I'm a huge fan of education. I'm a huge fan of
Mm-hmm.
advanced education. Like I'm
Yep.
someone that's literally got multiple master's degrees. Like I go pretty hardcore on education, advanced education, and the value of graduate degrees. Now that
Mm-hmm.
being said, um, I'm not the biggest fan of just folks that go through multiple years of undergrad and then just plow immediately into multiple years of graduate school. Because the challenge for so many I find is like they don't actually know what they want to do. They don't know what they want to
Exactly.
pursue. They don't know what kind of work they enjoy.
Yeah.
So you end
Yeah.
up with people that go to law school and rack up giant debts, and
Yep.
then finally finish law school and get into law and find out like, oh my God, I don't like being a lawyer.
I know some people.
Or
That.
they go off and they get an MBA and then they found out like, oh, I don't actually like managing people. This whole like being an MBA business manager and managing
Exactly.
people, like turns out I don't actually like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I am much more a fan of encouraging people. Like I think undergraduate sets an important foundation. We'll see how much of the
Mm-hmm.
undergraduate college world gets turned over in the pandemic environment. But just sort of reality in the world today, like a lot of upward income mobility starts with college degrees and starts with
Mm-hmm.
jobs
Yep.
that require college degrees. I don't love that the system's like that. I'm much more of a fan of getting the education than worrying about the pedigree of the degree of the school that you're from. But I think
Mm-hmm.
there's value for it.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get through that, though, I'm much more an advocate of get out there into the world,
Yep.
get your career going, spend some time in a job, spend some time in an industry, find out whether you like it at all. And if you
Mm-hmm.
get in there and you're there for a couple of years and you find out, like, you know what, the real path to move up in this firm is that I got to go get my MBA because that's how I'm going to get to the director level or the senior director level or whatever it is in the company, like,
Mm-hmm.
go back and get your education.
Mm-hmm.
Go do it at that point, whether you got to take time out of work, whether you got to do that part-time and stretch it out. I did all my graduate degree work while I was working, and I didn't have a ton of time and I didn't have a ton of dollars in the early days. Like I took the absolute minimum course load that was
Mm-hmm.
required to stay enrolled. Like my master's in taxation degree took me almost 4 years to get through because I literally
Yeah.
took the minimum course load,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but I stayed continuously enrolled. I just got in the
Mm-hmm.
habit, like Tuesday nights, a little bit of time on Thursdays, and Sunday
Mm-hmm.
mornings.
Yep.
That was my grad school routine for like a decade of my 20s. Like I did that with my
Mm-hmm.
CFP certification and the other designations in our world. I did that with my master's in financial planning. I did that with my master's in taxation. And so that let me do it while I was working. And frankly, the degrees were way more meaningful when I was actually
Yeah.
living. Like even now, as someone that's building businesses, you know, I appreciate the value of what MBAs teach more and more every day. I'm thinking about going back to get one, although I'm might be a little bit too buried in the amount of work that I'm doing right now.
Uh-huh.
But I look at what I'm learning today as someone that's running a business and flash back of like, what would this have been like if I went to get my MBA in my
Mm-hmm.
early 20s? Like, I don't even think I would have understood the context.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not trying to knock or bash anyone who
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
MBA or is going through it in their 20s, but
Yeah.
just it's really hard to contextualize what you're learning in the books into real human being situations, real business situations, until
Mm-hmm.
you've lived some business situations and made some, at least in retrospect, colossally bad and dumb business decisions, and then
Yep.
get a little bit more contextual knowledge of like, oh, now I understand why they taught that lesson and what that
Mm-hmm.
actually means.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
I think it's great to get those degrees, but I would encourage people like get your undergrad, get into the
Mm-hmm.
working world,
Yep.
learn it a little bit, find out what you like and
Mm-hmm.
don't like, find out what degree is even relevant in the thing that you actually find out that you like,
Exactly. Yeah. So even me.
and then go after the degree.
Yep. Go. Yeah. Even me. Like I majored on computer science. That's my undergrad. And but I didn't know what I want. I didn't realize like I've always been passionate about personal finance, but I didn't really quit my job. I mean, I didn't start like 4 years ago, and I was in my 30s. But people take a long time to even find themselves. Like, who are you? What do you
Yeah.
really want? Like, what drives you? What's your passion? Like,
Yep.
so I totally agree on that one. I mean, I think if I had like go back in time, I probably wouldn't have majored in computer science either. But I didn't know any better. I went to the Philippines and you go to college at age 16. I mean, like, because like, we don't have 2 years of middle school in the Philippines in Asia, so it's like,
Oh,
what do
interesting.
I know at age 16? I was like,
Yep.
I don't know. I'll just major. My aunt told me she was in the U.S. I was in the Philippines. Just major in computer science. I like, okay, sure. I I didn't know any better. So, but I had no regret doing that. So that's a really great point because then experience, and then you kind of know while you're doing the career, you might want to switch career, and then like it's quite sad actually. Like I know a couple of lawyers that they have 6 figure debt, and now they're like, oh, I really hate the law, being a lawyer, to work in the corporate world and stuff like
Yep.
that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
there's a challenge sometimes. Like, we go after the degree to get the job because the presumption is the job is a good job and makes a good income,
yep.
but it doesn't always make you good income, in part because everybody else figured out the same degree leads to the same job, so it gets very
Exactly.
competitive.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
and just the worst thing to me is like, and then you go do it and find out this isn't even what you like doing. And the
Yeah.
only thing worse than racking up a really large student loan debt to pursue a job is racking up a large
Mm,
student loan debt to pursue a job you don't even like doing. And then it's
yeah.
hard to make a switch because the thing you might actually like doing
Yeah.
might have been a fine income, but not a fine income when you're carrying tens of
Yeah.
thousands of dollars of debt or more.
Exactly, exactly. And at the time, if you have a 6 figure debt, like how much are you paying every month? That's like a mortgage on in some states, right? So
Yep.
yeah. Okay, that's a really good advice. So I'm just curious, like I know you have several business. I don't know if you mind listing them out again. I was wondering, like, do you have a business that actually can help lower income folks? Like how do you think like financial advisor can help the lower income folks? Because it feels like financial advisors, like, I mean, it's not their fault. We all need to make money, right? But then it seems like they're more targeting the more people with wealthy, who has millions of dollars, because the recurring revenue 1%. I mean, that's a lot of money. You literally can just sit on your butt and not do anything because they're gonna pay you no matter if COVID it goes up and down. But what about the people who really need it? Because that's why I became a financial coach, because I feel bad. Like I live in Silicon Valley. Like if you look on Yelp, I'm the highest rated on Yelp, and I'm probably the only financial coach here in Silicon Valley. So which makes me sad is like, what about people who, the average people, which is probably 90% of in the United States, who is serving them, who's helping them? So I'm curious to know your thoughts on that.
Well, so it's an interesting split for me because
Mm-hmm.
I literally kind of live in a business at both ends of the spectrum. So
Mm-hmm.
our main advisory firm is called Buckingham Wealth Partners. And yeah, at the end of the day, we work with affluent retirees who've accumulated a
Mm-hmm.
significant nest egg and want to make sure they make good decisions in retirement and don't make a mistake and ruin this thing they spent like 40 years
Yeah.
trying to build and develop. So like
Mm-hmm.
it's something I take very seriously as a sacred duty of what we do. Like, not to be highfalutin, but truly, like,
Mm-hmm.
if someone spends 40 years building up their nest egg, we should know what the heck we're doing and be really darn good at being stewards for that, because they
Mm-hmm.
don't get a second chance. It's not like
Yep.
say like, oh, well, I'll go back to work until I'm 100 and do this over again. So like, you only get one chance at this. And so as an advisor, you only get one chance to help people through with
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
when it's time to retire. And so
Yeah.
Buckingham does that. Incredibly proud of the work we do there. But as you know,
Mm-hmm.
like, there's a fundamental limiting factor that most people have not accumulated a pile of financial assets for an
Mm-hmm.
advisor to help them with. And
Yep.
I think one of the biggest blocking points for our industry is that our industry is historically built around this idea that there's two ways you can pay an advisor. You give them a
Mm-hmm.
pile of money to manage, and then they give you all the rest of the advice around it,
Yep.
or you buy the products their company has for sale.
Yeah.
And so if all you need is advice, you don't need to buy
Mm-hmm.
anything. You don't have a pile of money for someone to manage. You just actually want to write a check to someone to give you advice. It
Mm-hmm.
is insanely, ridiculously hard to find anybody that you can just pay for advice, because they just literally won't even take your money unless you have a pile of assets to move
Yep.
or are ready to buy a product.
Yep.
So we founded XY Planning Network specifically to address this issue. So the whole focus
Mm.
that we have at XY Planning Network is financial planning for a monthly subscription fee.
Okay.
Just pay an advisor on an ongoing monthly basis to work with you on an ongoing basis. You may not meet with them monthly because not something happens in your life every single month, but work with your advisor, pay them on an ongoing monthly basis, which frankly just fits how most of us live our lives. Like, pay my
Mm-hmm.
bills on a monthly basis. I get my
Yep.
paychecks every
Yep.
2 to 4 weeks. I pay my bills on a
Yeah.
monthly basis.
Yep.
I don't necessarily want an advisor that's going to charge me thousands of dollars up front because I don't have that sitting around my checking account.
Yeah.
But in a world where a lot of us pay $100 or $200 a month for our our streaming services and our cell phone and yoga and a whole bunch of other stuff, like we can afford to pay something on an ongoing basis for an advisor if we need some help with it. And so XY Planning Network was really founded on the basis of doing financial planning for fees, focus on monthly subscriptions, although we have some advisors that do it quarterly and some that do it hourly, but opportunities where you can just pay an advisor for the services. We broadly call this fee-for-service financial planning, which for anybody not in our industry may sound kind of obvious, like you pay a fee for services, but sadly in our industry, like we literally got an innovation award for this. Literally.
Yeah.
Kind of embarrassing for our industry, but that's where we are. And so XYPN is all built around this idea of just pay an advisor, be able to pay advisor a standalone fee to get some service for whatever advice it is that you want. So we now have almost 1,300 advisors across the country, and a pretty robust Find an Advisor portal. So like you can search by expertise, you can search by their capabilities, you can search by where they are. If you do want someone local, we give the information about how they charge, so you can figure out like, do you want someone on an ongoing basis? Do you just want someone for some one-time advice? And be able to do that. Now, the challenge even in our industry is, frankly, our people don't trust our industry much, largely for good reason, mostly self-inflicted harms. But what that means, unfortunately, is it's hard for advisors to get clients. And it's actually so hard for advisors to get clients, it tends to drive up the price. And so, our first step was building this model, and we've now had some great growth with it. The second step that we're looking to push more in the coming years is lifting standards for advice. Because I fundamentally believe if the average advisor you talk to is better than the ones you talk to today, it's easier to trust the advisor you're talking to. And that makes it easier for advisors and clients to find each other and work together. And ultimately, that actually brings down the cost of advice. We have a lot of challenges out in our industry because at the end of the day, the only requirements, the only like legal requirements to call yourself a professional financial advisor and be responsible for someone's life savings is a 2 to 3 hour regulatory exam you can study for in a week and a high school diploma. And the diploma is technically optional.
Yeah. Wow.
So we have incredibly low standards, minimum requirements to be an advisor. Now, many go way, way, way beyond that. Like we have wonderful advisors in our industry. We also have a lot who are hardly educated in anything finance related. They haven't been trained in money, finance, economics, or advice. And so when consumers have bad experience with a lot of advisors who aren't very good advisors, eventually they just don't trust advisors and it's dragged us on. And so we take that very seriously to the point that XY Planning Network actually sued the Securities and Exchange Commission over the latest regulations that they issued because we thought the regulations were too low for the industry.
Got it. Okay, someone just asked this question. When do you think the CFP board will consider having advanced specialization beyond the CFP curriculum? It seems like the industry is getting more and more lateral certification instead of more advanced specialization.
So it's a good question. As I view it, the future of our industry is going to have a lot more advanced education associated with it. The CFP certification has kind of become, or I guess is becoming, our sort of benchmark designation, right? When the legal requirements are really, really low and licensing requirements are low, something has to step up to be a voluntary certification and say, no, here's a line for when someone actually is putting the time and education in to be a professional. I think CFP certification has drawn a good line for that. But at the end of the day, CFP certification is essentially the equivalent of about 6 undergraduate courses in finance. So it's a good start. Accounting requires 150 credit hours in graduate school. Med school takes me 4 years. Law school takes me 3 years. CFP certification is 6 undergrad classes. So it's a start. We're going down the right road. We're not there yet. And so I ultimately see that playing out in 2 ways. One, I do think we are going to see more and more of what I would call post-CFP certifications. So designations that let you specialize, not as being mentioned in the question here, like not laterally as alternative to CFP marks, but past the CFP marks, going deeper
Mhm.
for education beyond that. And there's probably about a half a dozen designations out there right now in our space that I think legitimately do that. Now, if you look at the regulators, they list about 250 designations in our industry. So about 6 of them being real post CFP depth is unfortunately not
Mhm.
many of them. Part of it is just because the industry has figured out when advisors put letters after their names, consumers tend to trust them more and don't always do their due diligence to find out whether these are good letters or bad letters. Or I should
Mm.
say like good letters or overnight mail-in certificate letters, because our industry has had some of those. Few
Yep.
Wall Street Journal exposés have been done on them over the years.
Mhm.
So the industry has gone lateral because there is, at the end of the day, a demand for easier designations. But the more the
Mhm.
public recognizes, like, start with CFP certification. If it has CFP and a comma and more that come after that, they're probably deeper programs, because no one takes a crappy designation after you have a good one. It's not
Yeah.
worth the time and money.
Yep.
If it has CFP and a comma and more, it probably means they went deeper, and that's a promising sign. If you don't see CFP at the beginning of the list, you got to at least worry. There are some advisors out there that have some good designations beyond CFP certification, but
Mhm.
increasingly, I think you're going to see CFP becomes the gateway and the rest come afterwards. And I view that
Yep.
as a plus for consumers. It means like just start with this one.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's sort of a mantra in our industry, like
Mhm.
we need one designation to form one profession around
Mhm.
as the anchor point,
Mhm.
and then the other stuff comes later, right? Like I can go see a doctor. I expect all of them to have a medical degree, but many of them then also get board certified in specializations, right? I can go to a lawyer.
Mhm.
I expect all of them have a law degree and pass the bar, but then they also get LLM mass graduate degrees in specializations after law school. So that
Mhm.
model is there. I think our world is starting to head towards it. But the challenge per the question is, unfortunately, there's still a lot of consumer demands for any kind of letters after advisors' names. And
Mhm.
so that's part of why I advocate so strongly for starting with CFP marks. If it's CFP and then a bunch of other stuff, that's fine, but start with the one that's got clear standards and at least is pretty well known in the space. And the more we get
Mhm.
there, the more we can then focus on good post
Mhm.
CFP specialization programs after that.
Got it. So, what is the minimum to be for advisors to be part of the XYPN network? Do they need a CFP or?
So to be part of XY Playing Network, we have a couple of requirements. The first, if
Okay.
you're going to be publicly facing, yes, you actually have to have CFP
Oh,
certification.
okay.
Anyone who's
Okay.
going to be
Got
listed
it.
on our website
Mhm.
has to have
Mhm.
CFP certification. Now, we have a subset of members who join the network. They don't have CFP
Mhm.
certification yet. They're working on it and they're
Mhm.
studying for it. So, they can go start their businesses. I legally can't stop them. It's a free world. But they can't actually be listed on our site. They can't tell the public that they're a member of
Oh,
XY Planning Network
got it.
until they
Got it.
finish their
Okay.
CFP certification. And then we help them get discounts on certification. We have scholarships to help people through if they're in need. We have diversity
Got
scholarships
it.
to support broader adoption of CFP certification. So we'll do everything we can to get them through. But if you see an XY Planning Network member and they say they're an XY Planning Network member, you find them on our site. By definition, then they have their CFP certification.
Mhm.
They only charge fees,
Got
so
it.
no commissions, no products, outright
Mhm.
bans in the network. They have to be focused on financial planning. They have to be available virtually, and they have to
Mhm.
have a clean regulatory record. One material regulatory infraction, and we'll remove them from the network as
Oh,
well.
got it. Got it. What is a material one?
So material for us, the threshold that we set is any kind of regulatory fine, arbitration fee, or settlement in excess of
Oh,
$10,000.
got it. Got it.
Because
So,
we are an industry where like money stuff happens, markets go down, people get upset, they complain. Sometimes they're looking for someone to blame, even if it wasn't actually the advisor's fault. So we didn't want to quite just go at the level of complaints on someone's record, because
got
just
it. Got it.
complaints
Yeah.
happen. It's kind of like medicine as well. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
bad things happen and doctors get complaints. It's not because they're bad doctors. It's that sometimes bad things happen and people are looking for someone to blame. That's why, though, you have regulatory processes and review boards and different
Mhm.
ways to determine whether someone was at fault. If they're at
Mhm.
fault for anything that materially damaged another person,
Mhm.
then it shows up as either a fine or a settlement or an arbitration. Unlike any other organizations, even that set these standards, we
Mhm.
don't only ban people for significant regulatory fines or arbitrations. we also ban them even if they had large settlements. Because at the end of the day, you don't settle with someone for tens of thousands of dollars unless something pretty bad went down.
Yeah, got it. So, what's the average fees the advisor charge in XYPN? Because you say it's a subscription fee. So, what are the ranges right now? I don't know if you have the data if they have
Yeah,
to report it to you.
it's certainly it is a range. Different advisors
Okay.
have different models because we allow them to do whatever they want to serve their
Mm-hmm.
particular target clientele.
Yep.
Most members that we see are charging something in the neighborhood of about $100 a month up to about $200 or $250 a month.
Oh, okay. So
Uh,
that
Now we
what
see
is
a
okay.
few that are lower that are in like the $75 a month range. It's hard in
Okay.
our business. It's hard to go much lower than that because
Yeah.
advice is an intensive process. It takes a
Yeah.
number of hours of just meeting with people,
Yeah.
and it's hard to add up the number of hours and make the math work
Yep.
at a much lower price point than that. At least until we get some better
Yeah.
tools and technology in our industry. But
Got
I
it.
would say most are at about $100 to $200 a month. We have a few that get a little bit lower, down to $75 a month. We have a
Okay.
couple that are more specialized into particular industries or areas that go higher. Like we have some that work just with business owners that may start at $500 a month. Because at the point you're a business owner running a complex business, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you may have a little more financial wherewithal to hire professionals to do a lot of things in your business. So we do see some members that go up, sort of further up the scale, but still not investment based, just some people can write more fees for more assistance than others.
Got it. So it's like a subscription that covers like whatever financial advice they're asking for, like or like, does it involve wealth management or no? I mean, do they manage any wealth or because you said it's fee based, so there's no wealth management at all?
So it varies by the advisor and how
Okay.
they choose to do it. So
Okay.
and just what people are looking for. So for some members, they'll simply say like, look, we'll give you advice on everything across the board. Like if you've
Okay.
got dollars that you need to invest, great. You and I will go to the Vanguard website or the Betterment
Oh.
website, and
Oh,
we'll
okay.
open an account for you there.
Oh, cool.
Now,
Oh, okay.
some
Okay.
people say like, look, I don't even want to deal with that. I just want someone to do it for me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
Yeah.
if you want someone to do it for you, we have other members that say like, fine, we work with some of the industry RIA platforms that do this. So Schwab, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, there's a couple that serve our
Yeah.
industry
Got
and
it.
say, sure, like we'll oversee the dollars and make sure that they're invested as well. So there are a few firms in our network that will also support in managing the dollars directly if that's what you want as an add-on, but it's optional for them. It actually has to be optional by mandate for our network. You have to be available on a standalone fee for service basis. And just across the network, like some advisors do that work and some advisors don't because some consumers want help with that and some don't.
Got it. Okay. So we're almost at the hour. There are two more questions before we leave.
All right.
So okay, what do you think? Okay, with the coronavirus, what's your opinion about how the market's gonna go?
Well, I
I'm
think
just
at the
curious.
end of
I
the
know.
day, well, so there's two pieces that happen for the coronavirus pandemic in the market. The first is at the end of the day, look, markets just want life to return to normal because that means people go out and do what Americans do, which is buy stuff and power the economy, right? We are a consumer-driven economy, so the sooner all the stores and restaurants open, the happier the market is. So the faster we can get to vaccine certainty, anything that stabilizes this is good for markets. Now, that being said, there are two things ultimately that the markets really like. One is sort of the stability of economic growth when we get through the pandemic. And the second is when the government just writes ginormous checks and injects it into the economy. So the markets have just ramped upwards over the past few months. It's not because markets are happy about pandemic. It's because we've done literally trillions of dollars of economic stimulus and just you plow that much money into the economy, like stuff grows and things happen. It's not always very efficient, but for all the companies that are hurting, for all the local grocery stores that are hurting, delivery services are doing well. And the growth just kind of moves around. So at some point, we're going to get a little bit less stimulus. Hopefully by then we're getting a little bit more stable ongoing growth. And that's what moves the markets forward. If one of those falters while the other one isn't getting going yet, that's when you start seeing markets pull back, right? If the stimulus is slowing down, but we're not fully reopened, you're going to see the markets take a hit.
Got it. Okay. So do you think the stock market will crash in your opinion? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but like with the government trying to help out and stuff like that, do you think, how do you think it's going to
in,
affect the
in
stock
in
market?
general, just no great prognostication. Like, as long as the government is willing to keep plowing large dollar amounts into the economy, it's actually pretty hard for it to crash. Now, we can't just sort of plow money in forever. There are some
Yep.
limitations to this economically. There are some limitations to this because the inflation you can cause. So at some point that slows down. And if it slows down and we don't have control of the pandemic yet, that's the kind of
Mhm.
stuff that makes the market go down. But I not just sort of trying to say I can't predict the future, although I
Yep.
can't. Just it literally comes down to it will depend on how well we get control of the pandemic by the
Yeah.
time the stimulus dollars slow down.
Yeah, I do hope the vaccination will be out soon. Okay, so last question. So this actually came from one of my audience. So since emotion drives the majority of financial decisions, then how can we effectively bring emotional context into advisory conversation? So I deal with this a lot too. So I just wonder what do you think about this? Like, doing the money coaching more into the advisory because money is emotional. So
Yep.
does advisors start to talk about the emotions now, and almost like now there's the Financial Therapy Institute, and
Yep.
like what do you think about that? Are you trying to integrate more of that, the financial therapy, into the advisory? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I am. Remember, while it didn't end up being my chosen profession, like I was a psychology major originally.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
I've always had an affinity for I'm just gonna call it like this side of our business growing. Now,
yeah.
even within our industry, I actually think we do this sort of particularly poorly, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of two bodies of research out there about, I'll just call it broadly, like how investors behave and make decisions. The
Mm-hmm.
first is what our industry primarily knows. It's called behavioral economics, behavioral finance. And it's essentially a series of studies that have been done over the past 20 to 30 years that find all the different ways that humans do not behave the way that economists predicted they would behave.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Economists predict humans are going to be rational optimizing machines. It turns out we are not always perfectly rational and optimizing
Yeah.
everything. And so, like, literally in the behavioral finance context, we call these anomalies
Mm-hmm.
where the human failed to behave like the economist predicted the human was supposed to behave. And then we go in and study and try to figure out like what's going on and why is the human making the wrong decision and what's the problem here.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting as a body of knowledge. We have learned all sorts of ways that humans are not nearly as rational as economists would predict. And sometimes we actually figure out humans are more rational than we give them credit for. They just consider more factors than what the economists were thinking about in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it's a very descriptive body of knowledge. And it's just sort of built around this idea that if you are not completely perfect around everything you ever do with money, you are a flawed, broken anomaly that's doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's always bothered me both as a human and as someone who learned and trained in psychology to say, well, actually, there's a lot more stuff going on. People make a lot of
Mm-hmm.
decisions for a lot of reasons. And what may not seem rational to you is because they have a different context in coming to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a huge fan of seeing more of the more psychology and more financial therapy being injected into the financial advice world. But I think
Mm-hmm.
we come at it from the wrong perspective. That I think, frankly, this domain of coaching
Yep.
is a much more appropriate context for it because it's all about how do we empower people to make whatever is the right decision for them rather than this sort of implicit assumption that the economist knows what the perfect rational decision is for everyone. And if you don't make the decision that the economist predicted, you are
Mm-hmm.
wrong and flawed and broken and anomalous. So, I'm excited to see more research come in and more infusion from the world of psychology and coaching come in. But to me,
Mm-hmm.
it's not about the research that we tend to talk about in the industry, which is like behavioral finance and economics.
Yeah.
It's the science of decision making.
Yep.
It's the
Yep.
science of behavior change. Like I think we could
Yep.
learn a lot more from what Weight Watchers has learned about how to lose weight than
Yep.
what economists have figured out about why investors don't do what economists think investors
Yeah.
are supposed to do. And
Exactly.
so as more of that information starts coming into our industry, I'm excited about what it teaches us in how to actually help people make better decisions by looking at the science of how we make decisions and figure
Mm-hmm.
out how we make them a little bit better.
Okay. So, in your opinion, what will make people rich? Like, what are the science behind wealthy people? Like, let's say they just had they never had a good start. They didn't come from rich parents, whatever. So, what do you think will make them rich or wealthy eventually?
So as I view it, there's ultimately two things that end
Mm-hmm.
out sort of driving wealth and the cycle of wealth. Um, the first for most people is investing in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just your great until you are at retirement or very near retirement, your greatest asset is your human
Yep.
capital,
Yep.
your ability to go do work and labor and thinking things and whatever it is in the marketplace that the marketplace
Mm-hmm.
rewards with a salary and income.
Yep.
And investing into that human capital money machine that you've got for yourself is the first driver for wealth creation.
Mm-hmm.
And it exists that way in part because for most people, that's the single greatest place you can put an investment to get a return that literally grows your wealth,
Mm-hmm.
way more
Yeah.
so than trying to invest it in the markets.
Yeah.
Uh, the second reason that matters is all the stuff we talk about, people who save huge amounts of money, like all the stories of FIRE and people who successfully do extreme early retirement. All of those stories talk about how like frugally people spent and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
they saved.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you have to like read between the lines, figure like, oh, and by the way, they did this while they were making $220,000 a year. It's like, it's not they're brilliant people who figure out how to save 50 to 70% of their income. It's because they figure out how to make $200,000 a year and then
Yeah.
only lived on 60 or 80,000 of it. So
Yeah.
great to be able to live well below your means, particularly as
Mm-hmm.
your means go up. At some
Mm-hmm.
point, it's less about your ability to lift your income and more about your ability to not spend all of it and
Mm.
be able to get comfortable with what you've got and find a line of
Yep.
what enough is enough and save what comes afterwards. But I think we mash these up way too often that we take people who are struggling to earn enough to make ends meet and beat them up for not saving more, which to me is
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. You don't have enough to save. You need to figure out how to earn more, not save
Yep.
more.
Yep.
Even if it means investing in yourself. But there does come a crossover point where you're only going to get so much more ROI out of yourself. You just got to figure out how to get control of your spending so that
Yep.
you spend less than you make and you can actually start saving the rest. And that
Mm-hmm.
becomes the path to, I'll call it meaningful wealth
Mm-hmm.
for most people. That's how you become a millionaire. Now, if you want to
Mm-hmm.
become a 10 millionaire, very much have to be attached to the creation of a business. And
Yep.
just, I mean, we've seen that in practice, like, living in a wealth management firm, you can
Mm-hmm.
save a million or few dollars by lifting your income up really well and living really frugally and saving money, and saving hundreds or thousands or $10,000 a month. But nobody becomes a 10 millionaire by earning a good income and spending frugally and saving well. At some point, you have to actually be attached to the value creation of a business and kind of the multiplier effects that come off of that. But
Exactly.
that is not most people's journey. That's probably a challenge in a podcast or a live stream unto itself about
Yeah.
the journeys of entrepreneurship. But most people can get to some really good numbers that puts you up in the top couple percent of Americans
Mm-hmm.
by just being able to lift your income and then not spending all of the income that you lift. But
Yep.
most people, it doesn't start with how do you live more frugally and how do you save more. It's how do you reinvest in yourself to get your income up to the point where the
Exactly.
savings part can get a little bit easier.
Yep, yep, exactly. I love your passion and fire. You're just like you have so much motivation in you. It's like inspiring me now. It's like, oh, maybe I should start more stuff here now. So Michael, like how can people find you? I know you have kitses.com, but you're all over the place. But if they want to reach out to you, and I mean, I don't know if you're open to people reaching out to you. Like how can people
Yeah,
find you?
best way to find us is kitses.com. That's just kind
Mm-hmm.
of the central nexus for all the different stuff that I'm involved with. There's more information there if you're trying to find your way to XY Planning Network or Buckingham, or if you're in the advisor industry and looking for service information. We have a contact page there. It really does come to me. So you can submit stuff there. It really does come to me. I answer everything I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
But kitses.com is the anchor point. So you can find us there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. I really, really appreciate this. So I'm gonna convert this to podcast so people can listen in if they prefer to just listen versus watching. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it and have a great night, Michael.
My pleasure. Thank you, Christine.
Okay.
Have a good day.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.